Ah, hey, is this the place?
Yeah, sure is.
So I heard you were selling possessed pumpkins here. Is that true?
Yeah, it's right this way.
This one is actually one of my He died in Seattle. Why is he all the way out here? You know what? Whatever. He's cool, but I don't want that. Got anything else for me?
So you see, this pumpkin is actually Joe Biden's soul. What do you do lately?
Look, these are all nice, but none of them are striking my fancy. Don't you have something that just screams me?
Well, there are these 5, which all have the souls of children that were brutally murdered in a pizzeria. That strikes your fancy at all.
Fine, it's a deal.
Was that the bite of 87?
Music Man!
You are my superstar.
Did they run out of budget for the last animation?
Yes, I'll admit it. I'm a FNAF fan. Or at least I was. More on that in a bit. This isn't something I like to talk about too often because it just doesn't line up with most of the other things I talk about. I mean, sometimes I feel like FNAF fans and Nintendo fans are as far apart as they come. I truly believe that the first game in the series is an absolutely magical experience and one of the greatest horror games of all time, but what about the man behind all of this? The elusive Scott.
Hello everyone, I'm Scott, president of Domino's Pizza. Have you heard of Hatsune Miku?
No, not him.
Hey y'all!
No, not him either. There he is. Scott Cawthon, the definition of a family man. Just a normal dude living in Texas who loves making kids and still is to this day if his retirement announcement was anything to go off of. And if we're being real here, why the hell were people surprised that he was a Republican? I won't touch on this too much here, but really? A middle-aged dude from Texas and you thought he was anything other than that? Moving on. He was just a normal dude at the end of his ropes. Video games were a hobby for him, but that was it, just a hobby. I mean, he wasn't making much money on his games, of which there were a great variety. He made fairly simple platformers like There Is No Pause Button, or sometimes more robust RPGs like The Desolate Hope. And most importantly, the infamous Chipper & Sons Lumber Co. This game, man, if it weren't for this game, who could say where Scott would be right now? I'm not here to regurgitate the entire story regarding this, since any FNAF fan worth their salt already knows this by now, but this game literally saved his career. He went from working a dead-end job at the dollar store to living the life in such a short amount of time, and all because a game reviewer absolutely shat on Chipper & Sons, claiming that the characters seemed almost like animatronics, fitting right into the uncanny valley. Some people would end their careers right here. I mean, you're making a family-friendly game about running a lumber company as a cute beaver, and people look at your characters like that? I wouldn't have blamed them. But no, he took that criticism and made a whole game out of it. Evidently, it didn't do too much for him at first, since the Kickstarter for the game raised a whopping $0, but, as we've talked about before, Let's Plays would play a major role in the game gaining popularity. That's not the point though. This was the golden age. Five Nights at Freddy's, an indie horror game released in 2014. I'm not ashamed to say it, the series peaked here.
Peak fiction. Goat. Raw. Fire.
There could have never been another game in a series and I would have been satisfied. I mean, I don't blame Scott for continuing with the series. If I was making fat stacks off a game like this, of course I'd do more. The first game is the one I want to talk about in particular, because it really paints the point I want to make here. It is literally perfect. I've been a fan of the series since FNAF 2, but most of my exposure was through Let's Plays, theories, etc. With that being the case, I never truly experienced the game for what it is. I was just too scared. And rightfully so, just not the way I thought. Obviously, the game is pretty cheap. I mean, it was made by one guy using pretty basic development software as far as most gamers are concerned. Look, you won't see a single person pump out Elden Ring using ClickTeam. Trust me, I tried. That being said, it makes the game so much more impressive. Good old Scotty C was able to make an amazing horror experience within those limitations, something that many games missed the mark on completely. There are so many horror games that have appeared after the success of FNAF, but none of them have scratched that same itch. Bendy and the Ink Machine, Hello Neighbor, Doki Doki Literature Club, they all play around with interesting ideas in their own right, but none of them can come close to FNAF. FNAF 1 was very different than anything we were used to. No movement, no specific task you have to accomplish like Slender. You just sit there in the office, check the cameras, and watch. Watch as the possessed animatronics move closer and closer to you. You can't stop them. You just get to watch as they move through the building, messing up the cameras as they do. Your only safety measures are the doors and lights on either side of you. And couple that with the fact that all of these tools use up your limited power supply, it's amazing. Never before has resource management felt so stressful in a video game. I mean, there's Breath of the Wild, but that's more annoying than stressful. I never truly realized how scary this game was when I was watching those Let's Plays back in the day. Back in the day? Jesus, FNAF released in 2014? I feel old now. It is an entirely different sensation to be playing the game yourself. What scares you in a Let's Play is the jump scares. You're not the one playing the game, so you don't know what the player is going to do, meaning a jump scare will come out of nowhere and scare you. When I sat down and actually played the game for the first time, I realized how different it really was. The jump scares? Man, who cares about that? No, this is so much scarier. The tension, the atmosphere, it's absolutely dreadful. You go to turn on the light and you have no clue whether or not the animatronic will be there or not. When you do see them there, there's even more tension as you have to scramble to hit the door button before they jam it. On higher difficulties, the stress of having to deal with all of the mechanics at once weighs down on you. There are so many thoughts constantly going through your head. Am I checking Foxy enough? When's the last time I checked the doors? Where is Freddy right at this moment? 420 mode was daunting for me at first. There was a point where I could barely open the game without feeling immediate anxiety. How am I going to beat the game on its highest difficulty? I eventually got around to beating it, but it was difficult at first. Things are constantly happening, and you have to be moving constantly to match that. There's really not much room for error, and I love that. That tension is just amazing. And that is how it differs from a Let's Play. As I said, in a Let's Play, the jump scares are what scare you because you're not expecting them. You don't feel that tension that I described. Plus, the Let's Player acts as a buffer of sorts. I mean, watching Markiplier play the game inherently makes it less scary, you just can't change that. Playing the game yourself? That tension and atmosphere weighs down on you. You feel the pressure to be perfect. One mistake and you're dead. The jump scare plays a very different role in that case, and it's actually much more effective. You get that jump scare and you know that it's your fault. You made a mistake, you let one of them get in, you didn't watch Foxy enough, whatever it may be, you messed up. We feel the constant pressure throughout the entire game because we don't want to mess up. We want to win, and the closer you get to 6 AM, the more stressful it becomes. One mistake, and that's all down the drain. Hell, most of the time when I got jump scared in the game, I already knew I was going to be because I had already realized the mistake I made. This is why I think FNAF 1 is perfect. FNAF 2 is also fantastic, but I like FNAF 1 a little more due to the atmosphere. The building just feels so run down and decrepit, the sound effects are amazing and set the tone quite well. It's just perfect horror on a budget. FNAF 2 doesn't have quite the same atmosphere for me, and the toy animatronics most certainly aren't as creepy as their original counterparts, but that stress from the first game is amplified tenfold. There are 11 animatronics. 11! I still haven't beaten 1020 mode because there's just so much to juggle, and it's way more RNG heavy than the first game's hardest difficulty. With 420 mode, you learn the strategy and you perfect it, then you can beat it every single time. I got to that point pretty quickly, it just took a lot of practice. You just can't do that with FNAF 2. No matter how much you practice, no matter how good you are at the game, one bad stroke of luck can come in and ruin your day. For me, it's usually Toy Bonnie. Quite literally, the most annoying character in the game. He doesn't function the same as the other animatronics. If it's Mangle or Balloon Boy, you just put your mask on for a few seconds and then they go away. In an ideal world, that happens at the same time as another animatronic being in the room so you can knock out 2 birds with 1 stone. But Toy Bonnie, man. You see him there, and you put the mask on, and then you have to wait for him to enter the office, which can take up to 10 seconds, and then he plays his animation. If he decides he wants to wait forever to exit the vent, you can easily get killed by Foxy or have the music box run out. It's just a big game of Russian roulette here. Sure, you see him in the vent, you can try to open the camera to get a few last minute winds in for the music box, but he could easily take that moment to kill you. I made it to 5 AM once, and guess who screwed it up for me? Yeah. So obviously FNAF 2 is pretty stressful. When Toy Bonnie's in the equation, it turns from stressful to just anger, but whatever. FNAF 3 is much less stressful in my opinion. Not a bad game necessarily, but not my favorite. Springtrap is a fantastic villain and has a great design, but the game itself isn't too scary. I also don't care much for the overall aesthetic. It's all ugly greens and whatnot. The gameplay is fairly easy. You just use the audio lures to keep Springtrap far away from you, which isn't always as easy as it sounds, but it's definitely not as stressful as the other games. The phantom animatronics are also pretty easy to avoid for the most part once you know what triggers them. Should FNAF have ended here? Maybe. It does have a pretty good ending to send off the series as a trilogy, but I personally think we could throw FNAF 4 in there as well. I mean, I truly believe that Dream Theory was Scott's original intent. He wanted to use FNAF 4 to show that the events of the first 3 games all happened in a crying child's head, as he's on his deathbed, with the events being based on various rumors he had heard and fears that he carried. But of course, many people didn't put the pieces together, and Scott realized that some people wouldn't be satisfied with that ending anyway, so he kept the series going, and instead of continuing Dream Theory, he spun the series headfirst into the sci-fi direction. Look, I don't hate the stretch of games from Sister Location to Ultimate Custom Night. I just don't think it was necessary. If Scott would have just left it at FNAF 4, it would have been fine, but I can tolerate the next few games. Oh, we're releasing novels now. Okay, that's fine. The first 3 novels are decent, I don't hate them, and they fit well into the new direction Scott was moving in. FNAF World was... well, it was something. Something that I don't want to talk about. Sister Location went full sci-fi and focused more on storytelling than any of the other games, which is fine. There was still plenty of hidden lore to find, so it's okay. This game and FNAF 6 had some pretty interesting ideas that I don't hate. Stuff like Remnant and the story between William Afton and Henry is cool, but again, I just didn't think it was very necessary. I'm okay with it though, and I think if it had to keep going after 4, FNAF 6 was a good ending to tie up some loose ends, with Ultimate Custom Night serving as a nice epilogue to show that William Afton got what he deserved. But they just had to keep making games. Help wanted. What is this? You could have just made a cool VR version of the game, which I'll admit, you did, but you just had to tie it into the lore. What the hell is this? William Afton's soul is inside the circuit board, manifests in the game, and possesses the people that play it? What happened here? How did we go from the first game's simplicity to this? We've taken a huge leap from it just being a story about 5 kids being killed by some dude. Feel free to hate on MatPat's theories if you want, but they really aren't that far-fetched when you really look into things, and I'm pretty sure he's going much more insane than I am trying to piece all this shit together. I don't like this. This starts the era of FNAF that I just don't much care for. I mean, Scott literally put himself in the game. Say it isn't you all you want, man. It's obviously meant to represent you. I'm fine with meta stuff, but this is too meta. Not Scott Cawthon made video games that portray the Fazbear brand in a bad light. Wonder what that could be. So Fazbear Entertainment makes a VR game to cover it up. But wait, Mr. Video Game Man is in cahoots with them. Just take me back to the old days. Then we have all these books they released, Fazbear Frights. This doesn't even resemble FNAF anymore. What is this? Sea Bunnies? Fazgoo? I get it, it's a multi-million selling series, Scott wants to profit off of it, but this is just too far, man. This is not what I signed up for. Then Security Breach showed some promise, bringing the series into full 3D for the first time. Okay, cool, maybe we'll get something sort of like Resident Evil. No, what is this? This is not scary. I understand that kids love the series, but I don't care about that. FNAF has so much potential to be a scary, free-roaming game, and you failed to take advantage of that. The joy of creation, if it were a little more fleshed out, is a great example. 80 gigabytes and it looks like this. Oh, look at me, I'm on the PS5, I'm a big boy now. Yeah, and I don't like that. Go back to being the small indie game that was actually scary. This is not what I signed up for. Vanny is cool, I guess, but they didn't utilize her in the way they should have. Mr. X from Resident Evil 2. Cool, right? Once he's introduced into the story, he'll constantly roam the building, meaning at any given point you might come across him, or more accurately, he comes across you, and now you get sidetracked from whatever you were doing. Why wouldn't you do that with Vanny? They did it a little bit in small segments, but if they would have made it so that she's always around in some capacity, I would have loved it. I just don't know how to feel about this series anymore. It's gone too far for my taste. I just hope the movie ends up being good, and FNAF Plus is showing some promise.
Hey, what are you doing here? What are you trying to pull? We don't allow stealing at this establishment. We're gonna have to give you the worst punishment we've got.
Well, as punishment for stealing, they sentence me to owning their most terrible, gruesome, horrendous pumpkin. But it doesn't seem too bad so far. Oh, they turn into the ghost of Google Stadia.